Today is the fifth session of Bhaja Govindam. And what I thought today, what I will do is, instead of proceeding with the comments from 14 disciples of Shankara, since Shankaracharya has given powerful message in the first 13 verses, first the chorus verse, the next 12 being the thought process which kind of summarize the entire Vedanta, I thought I'll take time this morning to go through all those verses this morning, the summary. If you remember over the last 4 sessions, we heard one powerful message spontaneously come out of the mouth of Adi Shankaracharya on the banks of the river Ganges, when he saw an old Pandit, a Sanskrit scholar, repeating aphorism of grammarian Manini day in and day out, instead of taking the necessary steps to seek enlightenment before the death arrived at his doorsteps. He followed this strong statement with 12 melodious verses which beautifully summarize the wisdom of Vedanta. These were addressed to his disciples, but by addressing in a public space, they're also meant for average human beings to wake us up from our delusion. Gifted with keen observation of human behavior, Sri Shankara had noted the human beings were deeply rooted in the material wealth and sensual pleasures rather than being prayerful and spiritual. Instead of becoming one's true friend by uplifting oneself, remember Shri Krishna said, Uddharet Atmanatmanam, uplifting oneself with this precious gift, human life, common man, he felt, was wasting his time and thus turning into his own worst enemy. Calling him deluded, he said, worship Govinda. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate, Samprapte Sannihite Kale, Nai Nai Rakshati Dukrun Karne, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. Worship Govinda, worship Govinda, worship Govinda. O deluded one, when the appointed time comes, the time of death, the knowledge of rules of grammar will certainly not save you. The word Govinda stands here for Lord Vishnu, Brahman. Bhaja Govindam means worship Govinda. He said, he proclaimed, Govinda is that freedom that will give you the protection that you're seeking, you deluded fool. Govinda is that freedom, the immortality, protection from death. Govinda here represents Lord Krishna, the Purnavatar, the complete incarnation of Lord Vishnu. This Go here means cow. Govinda means one who protects cows. A cowherd, or in Sanskrit, Bahuvri Samad, Gam Vindatiti Govinda. But Sanskrit is such a beautiful language that Go has several other meanings. One of them is Go means Prithvi or earth. Govinda is the one who finds, knows, and protects earth. In his incarnation as Varaha or boar, it is said that Hiranyaksha, the Asura, took the earth into Rasatala or waters. When earth disappeared, the people were distressed and approached the Lord and asked him to rescue the earth. So the Lord appeared as Varaha and battled the mean Asura, Hiranyaksha, killed him, and brought the earth back from the waters. Lord Krishna is thus Govinda, the retriever of the earth. In other words, Govinda is the substratum upon which the world play goes on. Govinda, the Lord of cattle, is not simply the divine cow head of Gokul, but also is a life-giving factor behind all emotions and actions and the very essence of all living entities in this world. Go can also be taken to mean sense organs. Govinda then is the one who impels sense organs, the one who enlivens the sense organs or Chaitanya, or the one who directs the sense organs to perform their appointed functions. Swami Vijitananda gave a very practical example of an electric fan and elaborated on it. It's interesting that we were born the same year as he was attending Mumbai IIT. I was studying in the medical school the same year. We passed SSC in the same year of 1955. He said, we can see the rotations of the fan blades, but not the electricity which causes it. Similarly, we can observe the functioning for organs of actions and organs of perception, but while we may not perceive that Chaitanya, Govinda alone enables all these various functions and faculties to perform, with just as Kenopanishad described. If you remember, Yad vacha nabhyuditam yena vaga buddhyate tadeva brahmatvam viddhi nedam jadirupasi. May you understand that Brahman is that awareness which is not revealed by speech, but by which that awareness, the speech, is revealed. Verses 6 to 9 made exactly the same point by proceeding to include all other sense organs of perception, such as eyes, ears, nose, and so on, including even the mind. Govinda cannot be thought of by mind, but because of which the mind thinks. The word go also means speech. In this sense, Govinda means the one who is behind all speech. Govinda is the one who confers speech, the very power because of which all living creatures, through this medium of speech, convey knowledge to each other. If the speech is taken to be the Vedas, Govinda is then the one who reveals the Vedas and also the one who is revealed by the Vedas. Thus, in a broad sense, the name Govinda is not limited to Lord Krishna. It means the self, the Brahman. That's why Sri Shankara says that you may worship Govinda, not simply yourself, but in reality, self of each and every one of us. Sri Shankara then proceeded to warn us about two dangerous entities in human life. One, craving or utter greed for wealth. And two, getting infatuated with individuals of the opposite sex. The greed for human being is a significant obstacle in the path of worship. Man not only wants wealth, but also wants to accumulate it, wants to hoard it. There is no grudge whatsoever against the wealth in this statement. Remember, he's not saying you should not have wealth. We do require wealth to provide for our basic needs, such as food, shelter, and clothing. We also need wealth to fulfill our responsibilities to our family, both the nuclear family as well as the extended one. Without money, day-to-day life cannot be sustained. But what this enlightened teacher of Vedanta, Sri Shankara, is criticizing is our never-ending thirst for money. Instead, we must create in our mind inspiring thoughts of reality or divinity. That's what he said, Sadbuddhyam. We must contemplate upon Govinda, the Brahman. The second warning he gave was a natural attraction for the opposite sex prevails in all living beings, and the human being is no exception. However, this attraction becomes infatuation. It takes over the mind and does not allow it to dwell on Govinda. It is difficult to maintain purity under natural conditions. Then why should one's eyes ever feast on a woman that is not married to? Every human being must take proper decisions based strictly upon the moral and ethical values. And I'm talking about dharma. See, Shankara does not suggest that we should suppress our feelings. Such suppression only results in distortion of the mind. Preoccupation with sense gratification results in a tremendous waste of energy that should be conserved and redirected towards one's own improvement. Remember, we said last time, animals merely follow their instinct. It is said, ahara nidra bhayamaithunam cha samanyam etat pashubhir narana. The following things are common both to the animals and the human beings. What are those? Ahar, need to appease hunger. Nidra, need to sleep and freshen up. Bhaya, fear, and hence the need to protect oneself. Maithunam, the need for sense gratification. These natural instincts that are present in animals as well as in human beings. Unfortunately, these are the instincts that are mostly glorified in our present day society all around. We as human beings must remember that we have something special that sets us apart from animals, which is mainly the adherence to dharma, living with righteousness and with proper values. Remember, dharmo hi tesham vishesha, dharmena hina pashubhi samana. We have been blessed with intellect, a unique discriminative faculty with which we can think and assign the place to the things that are justifiably theirs. No more, no less. Today, we see that the humanity is mostly exhausting itself in the pursuit of artha, security, and kama, the sense gratification. When these become the predominant or perhaps the only impulses in life, dharma or the value of virtue is bound to suffer or even disappear altogether. Animals act strictly on their instincts and result in impulses. Human beings with the God-given free will, with a rational intellect with which they have the capacity to curb and control the flow of all instincts of carnal pleasures and redirect those energies in the service of the others towards the causes that are much more noble and divine, such as to gain the vital knowledge of Brahman by regularly praying to Lord Govinda. Sri Shankara reminded that since our human existence is ephemeral and our life is unstable, just like a droplet on the lotus leaf, we do not have a moment to waste to find out the right solution for our long-lasting true happiness. Brahman, the infinite, projects itself in the form of the human body due to sankalpa or prarabdha. This Brahman, existing in infinite consciousness, is divine and all-pervading. This very Brahman, functioning in and through its equipment, the individuality, known as Jiva, also called as Atman. Ignorance of its own nature, this Jiva is unsteady, and over-agitated. Only when Jiva gains the knowledge of his true nature through the teaching of the Guru, the enlightened teacher who enters in one's life only through divine grace, that individual, no longer ignorant, returns back to merge once again with the waters of consciousness around, just the way the dreamer awakens in the knowledge that was simply a dream. Shankara indicated that our relationship in our daily life are merely the roles that we play. While playing these roles, he suggested that let there be love, let there be charity, let there be compassion, and let there be service. Such relationships should be free from demands and intense attachments, since those are the things that lead to dependence. We must find out as to who we really are and our purpose in this human life. Even though these family relationships are absolutely important and absolutely essential, Shankara agreed those should not be pursued to the total exclusion of fulfilling all the four essential goals of human life, four purusharthas, most importantly, moksha. After taking vows during wedding, the couple seeks security by creating a friend circle, raising a family, and the needed wealth, enjoys the pleasures of life with norms set by the society by adhering to dharma, but never forgets their ultimate goal they set as a couple, which is to be liberated while still living moksha. Shankara then laid down a step-by-step approach to accomplish that very goal by emphasizing the glory of satsanga, calling goal-oriented human beings discriminative and thoughtful individuals, kashchit dhira, who want to see that their self, pratyagatmanam, aikshat, withdraw their attention from their usual preoccupations in the pursuit of material wealth because they desire immortality. Amrutatvam icchan, as stated in Katha Upanishad. However, as they withdraw, they do not become isolated. Their relationship with the world must simply change. It is not one of exploiting, but instead one of giving. It is a relationship of worship. They both acquire an abiding mind, a mind with utmost faith and shraddha. It is not a blind faith, but instead utmost willingness to advance their studies till their goal is reached through personal conviction. They maintain a positive outlook that they would reach that goal to answer the fundamental questions of life and entertain no negative thoughts. Shraddha means absolute confidence, utmost sincerity to pursue God, and intense longing to reach that goal. Let's see the steps he laid down. Satsangatve nitsangatvam. Sangha means company or attachment. Nisangatva means detachment or non-attachment. So satsanga, the company of good, creates the freedom from unhealthy attachment or attachment with wrong type of individuals who can influence our behavior. When there is attachment of good, there is detachment from the bad. Thus, when we keep company of good, we slowly grow out of the influence of the bad. Attachment is the dependence upon the world. Very often, giving up attachment mistakenly means giving up contact with the family or running away from the world. But only the dependence on them has to be given up. To have love for your family and friends is not an attachment. Let me repeat. To have love for your family and friends is not an attachment, but dependence on them is to be given up. When the sense of overwhelming or unhealthy attachment is withdrawn, the selfish desires have dissipated, the mind becomes clear, slowly becoming free from moha or delusion. Water becomes clean and transparent when the dirt is no longer there. Mind is like water. When it's turbulent, it's very difficult to see. But when the mind becomes calm, everything becomes clear. When the delusion is no longer there, all delusory false values disappear. That is the state of nirmohatma. Clarity of vision returns, the mind gets pure. This purification of mind means the impurities of mind, those are the impurities, raga, dveshas, or unhealthy attachments and aversions, are dealt with. Such a pure mind enjoys peace, serenity, tranquility, and composure. Such a pure mind understands the truth, nirmohatve nischalatatva. The tranquil mind becomes objective. Then it's able to understand exactly what the scriptures tell us. Until then, whatever we hear, whatever we read, is processed by mind, which is turbulent, distorted by ragadveshas, likes and dislikes. When those distractions are no longer there, the mind is able to appreciate the unfoldment of the vision of the scriptures. Our mind understands very clearly what the scriptures reveal, but slowly develops and abides in that knowledge. Our mind, antakaran, goes through a process of hearing about emotive, making efforts to fully grasp cognitive, and finally knowing cognitive Brahman. And that entire process, called nididhyasana, is a continuum of shravanam, mananam. Following that, there is a freedom even while one is alive. Nischala tattve, jivana mukti. By the way, I hope Anant is listening today because it is his analysis that he beautifully describes in his book, Accomplishing the Accomplished, Varied Knowledge Shankara. That's where the reference is coming from. Shankara then raised a question, where can there be samsara when the truth is realized? When this real understanding of oneself comes about, no longer are there the continuous cycles of birth, growth, decay, disease, and death for the living yate tatve ka samsara. He gave several practical examples to clear the powerful teaching. The idea behind all these examples is that when the cause is gone, its effect disappears. He said, when there are no rains and the water evaporates completely, the pond ceases to exist. Similarly, so long as the controlled thoughts of sensual desires play in mind, the immature youth strives to fulfill them. When the individual matures and behaves according to personal ethical values and social norms, inappropriate, passionate activities gradually taper and finally cease to exist. The other example that he gave was that one man grows old and retires, and the income diminishes or disappears. The friends and relatives, supporters and admirers suddenly seem to disappear from the scene completely. The entire retinue, who always showed up to share the wealth one brought home, suddenly seems to disappear. Shankara concluded this important verse by stating that this self-non-acceptance out of ignorance of our true nature. What Shankara concluded in part was is that self-non-acceptance arises out of ignorance of our true nature. Once that ignorance is no more, and one understands and realizes tattva, truth of the self, as to who we really are, the need for samsara goes away completely. Not only this ignorance, but also the false notions or misconceptions about ourselves, as beautifully described in Nirvana Shatakam, are also removed. I'm so happy that Professor Ambachan is teaching us Nirvana Shatak these days. Instead of considering ourselves as limited beings, suffering from all kinds of limitations, and thereby entertaining many of the complexes that we exhibit, we then come to understand that simply the awareness, the integral part of cosmic awareness, Jit, is ever present or immortal Sat, is always unlimited and happy, Ananta and Ananda. Thus, the individual who once was trying to become a person who's adequate and acceptable comes to realize that he already was such individual, just like the missing 10th person in that famous story. Thus, no more indeed is the need of the samsara or the unending transmigration through various life cycles of birth and death. Shankara then advised us, take no pride in your worldly possessions, the people you command, or the beauty of youthfulness. Time loots away all these things in a moment. After knowing this illusory nature of all those, you should realize the state of Brahman and enter it and stay there. Most human beings, he reminded us, are bogged down because of their false vanities and hollow conceits. They keep on bragging about their wealth or large number of employees they have hired commanding their respect and the youth and beauty they possess. Wealth includes power, position, name, fame, etc. They do not realize that the Father Time can and often does instantly loot all these so-called accomplishments. Shankara reminded us that by knowing the illusory nature of all these, we must realize that this creation is product of Maya, Maya Mayam. Maya means magic. For us, practical understanding, it means that this creation is transient and has no permanence. It exists, but it's transient and has no permanence. We must recognize that this youth, this wealth, this retinue of friends and family are transient, and hence no everlasting happiness can come through them. Hence, one must renounce them, relax. In Vedanta, renunciation is not an action. Let me repeat. Renunciation is not an action in Vedanta. It is a state of mind, a certain attitude towards the things of the world. In renouncing, we do not do something or discard outwardly. Renouncing, we do not do something or discard something outwardly. Renunciation is nothing but seeing anything, everything for what it is and knowing the true worth of these things. Shankara concluded this verse by stating, should simply realize the state of Brahman and enter into it. Having learned that the entire world or this creation is illusory and transient, and recognize that Brahman is the only thing that remains constant and never changes. Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya. Once we truly come to understand our inherent nature of Satchidananda, we simply merge in these waters of consciousness, Brahman, and stay there. The 12th verse, we heard Shankara warning us, as the time sports and life goes away, ebbs away, the opportunity to seek the ultimate freedom in this rare divine gift of human birth is wasted. We often continue to struggle all through the life, ever tangled up in the never-ending materialistic desires, till the very day that we die and fail to reach that coveted goal of liberation. In this verse, he expressed his frustrations and directed us to use this precious and human life for the purpose of reaching the choicest ultimate goal, Purushartha, of gaining moksha, before it's too late, since, trust me, no one knows exactly when we would die. Besides, moksha is only possible in the human birth. Celestials cannot, because that precious divine gift is a unique capacity for human beings to make personal choices. Remember, Durlabham Toyame Vedat, Deva Anugraha Hetukam, Manushyatvam, Mumukshatvam, Mahapurushansya. Only when divine grace, Deva Anugraha, you get Manushyatvam. And you're lucky enough to have desire to get liberated. And hopefully you get a good guru who comes in your life. So absolutely essential to pursue that goal well before our physical strength is lost and mental acuity is there no more. As the first step, Shankar reminded us, you better start praying Almighty Govinda. In the final verse of his teachings, Sri Shankara said, one must think of the ordainer, Niyanta. He told us, we always are worrying since we erroneously think that we are the ones who earn all this wealth with our own hard work and talent and take care of everyone in our family and the friend circle. Remember Lord Shri Krishna say in the 9th chapter, Anyanyas chintayanto mam ye janaha paryupasate tesham nityabhiruktanam Yoga Kshemam Vahamyam. Those who devoutly worship me, always meditating on me, I bring for them what they lack and I preserve what they have. Ordner Brahman is in charge of Yoga Kshema, meaning bringing all the things to the devotees and protect all those things that devotees may already have. Hence, we should not waste any time and energy in our human life, but instead utilize it judiciously to regain the knowledge of our own true nature, Brahman. Starting with heartfelt flares to the ordiner, Lord Govinda, and continuing them all through the life. Sri Shankara concluded this masterpiece by using the perfect metaphor of a boat as we live through this challenging human existence. He said, traveling over the open seas, one is protected from huge waves and dangerous water creatures by being a boat. Similarly, in the company of enlightened Guru, captaining that ship, who was enlightened through the lineage of enlightened teachers, and by always associating with individuals who have already gained viveka or actively working towards that wisdom. What is the wisdom? The capacity to ascertain what is right or wrong, what is ethical and what is unethical, what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. And in that process, come to realize a true identity. In that knowledge, one remains fully content in the constant state of happiness, freeing one from samsara, the unending cycles, and birth and death. Thank you. That's the summary of the first 13 verses that we started in Bhaja Govind. I'll stop at this stage and invite comments from all people.
Thank you very much for the detailed summary of Shankara's contribution to this text. As you said, I think in his contribution, the essence of the whole of the Bhaja Govindam is already there. But I would just, comment or build on what you mentioned with reference to Sravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. Just a few thoughts to contribute to what you've already said. So, I mean, one of the verses that you beautifully discussed before, and of course you also mentioned this morning, is this ladder of emancipation, satasangatve, nissangatvam, you commented upon extensively. And so I think that this process that Shankara describes here in this verse is indeed summarized in what you mentioned as the triple process, which comes originally from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad,
right.
That in learning about the Atman, there should be Sravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. So I think we can easily connect Sravana to what you spoke of as Satasangatve. Because the source of this teaching is, of course, in the Shruti, in the Veda, but then this Veda is taught or expounded by the Guru. So our tradition has always advised that, yes, it is, we can, read texts like the Upanishads and so on independently by ourselves, but these texts are best learnt at the feet of a teacher. And I've often thought of why I'm sure you have many thoughts of your own on this, Shashi, why our tradition emphasizes so much the role of the teacher, that we should seek this wisdom from a teacher. You know that verse in Bhagavad Gita, Tad vidhi pranipati, pariprashne seva, go to the teacher. And the reason is that a teacher embodies this knowledge. He or she shows that this knowledge, he or she shows the possibilities of this knowledge, that it can happen, it's real, it's not just abstract or theoretical. So the teacher, is one who embodies the possibility of this knowledge. And that's a very important symbol for us. The tradition always emphasizes, as you said, that this should be sought from one who knows it and from one who has made it a part and integrated in his or her life. So that's where Sravana occurs. We should hear from the teacher. And then, of course, the second process you mentioned is manana. And I think the role of manana is as follows. Avidya, which the problem that you identified, is a very deep-rooted problem for all of us. You know, it causes ingrained habits of thinking and responding to the world. It's a universal, deeply ingrained problem. So that when Sravana occurs naturally, you know, we're going to have doubts because we have thought about who we are, as you said, for such a long period of time that when we are presented, and you pointed out your alternative, when we are presented with an alternative understanding of who we are, we begin to question it.
Yep.
Is this really possible now? You know, could I have gone my whole life thinking of myself in a way that's contrary to what the teacher is saying that I am? So manana becomes this process of churning, of reasoning. And it's a very wonderful thing in the sense that we come from a tradition that invites and welcomes the use of reasoning. We should question, we should investigate, we should inquire. We are not, we do not frown or we do not oppose doubts. We welcome questions, we welcome doubts, as you end your presentation this morning by inviting questions.
Yep.
So, and that's you inviting people to engage in the process of manana. That's what you're doing. So please let us think about this together. What are the doubts? What are the contrary opinions we should inquire? This is a manana. So satasangatve nissangatvam, nissangatve nirmohatvam. So the removal of confusion, doubts, the removal of moha, nirmohatvam. And then the third line, nirmohatve, nischalatatve. Now, Niditya Asana, as you mentioned, is really interesting and important. So let us say that you have engaged in the process of Sravana, you've heard, and then Manana, and you've reflected and you have confronted your doubts and discussed this with the teacher. Now you have, you're free from doubts about what the Shastra tells you about yourself. Mm-hmm. So what is the third step, Nidithyasana? We still have these deeply ingrained habitual ways of thinking and acting, what we speak of as vasanas. These vasanas have left deep impressions in us. So now begins the process of transforming ourselves, our habits of thinking and our emotional lives on the basis of what we now know, what we understand. And this, I think, is Nidithyasana, which I would describe as the integration of knowledge in one's way of being. Now that I have understood, I have to now integrate this wisdom into my way of being, in my relationships that you've described, in freeing myself from attachment, in overcoming my anger, in controlling my likes and dislikes. Or else, the danger that we have, Shashi, and which we see so often, is that this knowledge only become words.
Yeah.
They become words that we recite, but they do not become words that have produced fruits in our lives that really transform us. So this is why Nidithyasana is so important. I think of it as the practice of knowledge, the practice of knowledge that makes knowledge transformative. Because, if I give you an example, so, someone recently got the Nobel Prize award in physics for work with the black holes, right? So we learn, well, there are black holes out there in our universe. And then we forget about it because that knowledge really doesn't make a difference to us. whether they are black holes or not, doesn't really affect our, what we do tomorrow. But this knowledge, as you said, this knowledge is not true knowledge unless it changes us, unless it transforms our self-understanding. And by transforming our self-understanding, it transforms how we what we are in this world, how we relate to our families, you mentioned, to our community. And so, Niditya Asana is that process of integrating knowledge, overcoming long established habits, allowing this wisdom then to shine in who we are. You remember the very famous Upanishadic line, Shashi, Brahma vid Brahmaiva bhavati.
Yep.
Brahma vid Brahmaiva bhavati. One who knows Brahman becomes that.
Yeah.
So Niditya Asana is that process of becoming, knowledge being fruitful, knowledge making a difference. So that's what I wanted to add to what your beautiful presentation this morning, Shashi. That in our tradition, knowledge is a discipline.
Yep.
Knowledge is a process. It's not simply words. It's words that are fruitful. Words that make a difference.
But doctors always practicing,
Yes. Yeah.
to get perfect. Try to become perfect. So.
Yeah.
But
So
I think
Gita speaks of it as jnana abhyasa, the practice of knowledge. Jnana abhyasa. Yes.
Thank you very much, Anand. I really appreciate it, because that's the reason I think we're so lucky that we have a community here in the town where we can get together and have regular discussions. So only thing is to remember that meet on Sunday and then forget everything tomorrow. Doesn't work. You have to go.
That's so true.
And you have explained everything else, but I'll give you my pedestrian view of the two texts that we are studying, Bhajagovinam and Nirvana Shatakam. And this is a very superficial first impression of reading these two side by side. I found Bhajagovindam, despite all the detailed explanation that you have given, to be quite pessimistic and depressing.
Okay.
It does not emphasize the positive. It emphasizes, affirms always the negative. So many knocks on my knuckles by the teacher at every verse. So my knuckles are red, bleeding. I no longer feel the pain anymore. I feel numb. After that, everything becomes very numb.
Yeah.
So I think at a very superficial level, I don't think Bhajagovindam is addressed to me. It's probably for somebody who is seeking sannyasa or who is seeking renunciation. On the other hand, if you go to Nirvana Shatakam, Adi Shankara, same author, systematically and logically peels away the misconception I have about my body, my mind, my intellect, and my emotions. Systematically affirms at every stage that you are Shivoham. That's a very positive message that I find to be very useful to me, because it doesn't degrade me. It says, you are that. The reason you don't know that is because I want to peel away all the misconceptions you have about your body, mind, intellect, and emotional layers that surround your true self, which is Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham, Shivoham. So that is my, if I want to study the text in detail, the host has studied the video. Thank you.
I think that's beautifully comment that you made. Only thing is, remember, I think when he speaks in the public space, it is meant for both the disciples of his who are sannyasis and all the general public, for us too. So he's teaching for all of us. I think you have to take everything that knowledge comes about in the context with all other knowledge that has been described in the past. So I would not be as pessimistic as you are. I learn from it how the patients come with the symptoms, what signs they present, and how to treat them. So I won't be depressed. As a matter of fact, I'll be happy that my doctor make a correct diagnosis and direct me in the correct direction for treatment. So I think it depends on how you take outlook, maintain a positive outlook, have that shraddha, and you won't be worrying about your nails. The bird will be just fine. Anant, you want to say something about it?
No, I think I think Prasanna's comment and your response are adequate. Of course, Sri Shankara has this very specific purpose in Bhaja Govindam, and I think that's what Prasannaji is putting his fingers on. As you know, the subtitle of it is the Moha Mudgara. So it's the primary purpose there, and he seems to be speaking, to the male ascetic is to awaken this sense of renunciation. It's to inculcate the value of sannyasa, which is what he seems to be asking. But when we read the text, as you do, we read the text also as applicable to us in our different situations in life. We extend the meaning of it, as I think you are certainly doing in the way you are teaching it, and even in your comments this morning. That, so for example, the renunciation of the detachment is different from love. You're commending love, and you're not in family life. So you are affirming the value of family life. And I think Shankara in his text, has a very specific purpose that Prasanna is correctly identifying and contrasting with Nirvana Shatakam, where it's affirmative of the Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham.
Thank you, Anand. As a matter of fact, Prasanna, it's like an alarm clock that goes off. Alarm goes off in the morning. You can look at the alarm as negative, but you can at the same time, you remember it's waking you up and getting you doing good things in your life. So that's the way you look at it.
Agree.
No,
But as I said, it was my first impression when you read that.
No, thank you again. Really appreciate it.